sometimes we used to play about an 8-hour day. But at the time, it wasted us and totally kind of wrecked us. And I remember getting home to England, my dad really thought I was half dead, you know, must look like a skeleton. But I hadn't noticed the change. I was just having such a ball, you know, staying up late for a young kid.
Anyway, we got back to Liverpool and all the groups that were doing this sort of shadows type of stuff. And we came back, leather jackets and jeans and funny hair, macking Xiao.
Stuart had elected to stay in Hamburg with Astrid, so the rest of the guys came back and they needed a bass player.
On the 27th of December 1960, I was at Litherland Town Hall and saw for myself the Beatles.
We came back and people in Liverpool thought we were German because in one of the adverts it said direct from Hamburg, the Beatles. So a lot of the girls came there and, you know, they said, Jawohl! No, we're from here, don't worry.
But the show was just wild, totally different from what other bands were doing. All the amps were on 11.
They were all in jeans and leathers. Jeans were never allowed in the dance halls in those days. In actual fact, a lot of the dance halls, you couldn't get in unless you have a tie.
When they saw these 5 guys stamping on the ground and kicking all sorts out of the amplifiers and shouting in the background, they were going to be the reincarnations of the early Elvis or James Dean or something like that. But they wanted to go back to the beginning.
So we're here right at the famous Reeperbahn, the main street here in St. Pauli. And right on the other side of the street over there is the former Top 10 Club.
The Top 10 was started by Peter Eckhorn, a young Hamburger 4 years ago. Before he took over, it used to be a nightclub where customers could ride on horseback in a ring in the middle of the floor.
And his father ran a hippodrome on Reeperbahn. He asked his father if he could convert that hippodrome into a rock and roll club.
We first went to a place called the Indra, which was shut down, and then we went to the Kaiserkeller, and then we went to the Top 10, which is probably the best one on the Reeperbahn. And it was really, at that time, it was fantastic. Echo on the microphones, and it was really a gas.
They lived on top of the building, like, well, right, they lived under the roof in a small room. This is where John, Paul, and George showed their complete Hamburg rocker outfits with black leather suits and gold and silver cowboy boots. They were the band of Tony Sheridan there. So Tony was the big star. The Beatles were his band. It was their second engagement in Hamburg. They played there for 92 nights in a row at the Top 10 Club.
Every day, every week, I know that love is here today, but I like it. Woo, I like it.
Tony was the sort of star. He'd been in Germany quite a while, and he was very well known, and he could speak very good German.
So, of course, when we went out to Germany, we were at the Top 10 Club. There's another of our idols from the television, English rock and roll. You don't see many of them.
I was with Tony when Tony was at the Kaiserkeller. After 14 days, Tony and me, we knew we were getting married.
Tony Sheridan, from my point of view, was the musical king of St. Pauli. And everybody wanted to be like Tony, even the Beatles. The young English musicians used to call him the teacher.
I mean, for 3 months, every night, 8 hours. C, Paul, C, oder B-flat, oder E minor.
In their early recordings, when George was really young, you can find a lot of licks Tony played before. so many hours a night, day after day or night after night. That's horrible. But it taught them to entertain people and to survive.
And we got very good as a band because we had to play 8 hours a night.
What you'd have was you'd have the fellas who owned the clubs would have what they call preli. It was Preludin, which was a slimming tablet. You know, and so that got everyone talking a lot.
The only way to survive in Hamburg, to play 8 hours a night, was to take pills. Like the waiters gave you the pills and drink.
You'd take 3 or 4 on Friday and go to sleep on Tuesday.
I've always needed a drug to survive. I can't, you know, and the others too, but I always had more, you know. I always took more pills and more of everything because I'm more crazy. I mean, like in Hamburg, I used to sleep on stage. We used to eat on stage. We used to swear on stage. We were absolutely au natural.
We were always searching B-sides of records for sort of odd little things. We'd come on with slightly more R&B stuff. They were a cover band. We were all American cover bands.
We used to do all those Barrett Strong, you know, Money, and all that sort of tunes that weren't popular particularly, but were quite heavy, and all the Chuck Berry, Little Richard, all the rock and roll things. Yeah. And we just kept doing that when that sort of period had died out.
And you could feel when they rehearsed or something that they were very eager and they wanted to do it really as good as possible. Paul was getting very angry if Stuart played the wrong bass note or somebody made a mistake and played the wrong chord. He got very pissed off.
As I say, I did like Stu a lot, but we had tussles. I mean, it even came to an on-stage tussle. It was actually more locked in a deadly embrace than anything, because we wouldn't let each other go to sort of punch. And all the old German, because of gangsters, were like laughing at us, you know.
He got a scholarship in Germany, which was very rarely done then for a not German person. That is why he left the Beatles then, to become a student of the College of Art in Hamburg.
So the group was going to continue minus Stu, and that just became a reality, and Dags kind of voted me as the bass player. So I just started to learn bass, really, and then I got my own, what became the Beatle bass. I bought that in Hamburg, which is a little Hofner violin bass.
So the second time we went back when I was 18, that's when we were backing up Tony Sheridan. And at that point, this fella came into the club, this famous record producer and musician, he was called Bert Kempfert. And his claim to fame was he had a #1 hit in America, Wonderland by Night. And remember, this buzz went around, we've got to be good, play really good, we may get a chance to record.
Well, one night, Bert Kempfert was in there, and he liked us, so he had a recording studio, and we went down to this big barn of a place, like a big gymnasium. It was called Tony Sheridan and the Beat Boys. They didn't like the name Beatles. And we recorded a couple of titles, one of which was My Bonnie. That was the one they liked. Brian's dad owned a shop called Nem's, North End Music Stores. So the only record was this one, My Bonnie, which a fellow went in and asked for it at Brian's record shop, and Brian hadn't heard of it.
I assumed, for some reason, that they were from Germany. Anyway, he told me that they were a Liverpool group and that they'd just, in fact, returned from Germany and that they were playing in a club called The Cavern, about 100 yards away from my office.
After their second visit to Hamburg and they returned to Liverpool in the July of '61, the transformation was unbelievable. They were dressed from head to toe in black leather jackets, black leather trousers, black Cuban heel boots, But their harmonies were exceptional. It was like a private party every time they played because of the close proximity from the audience to the stage.
Because we were building a lot of public attention. You couldn't miss it. I mean, when Brian found us, we were very hot in the cavern. We were pulling big audiences in.
We knew who Brian was because we bought all our records from him. He was impeccably groomed, well-spoken, well-dressed. So he did stand out like a sore thumb.
I was amazed by this dark, smoky, dank atmosphere, this beat music playing away. The Beatles were then just four lads on that rather dimly lit stage, somewhat ill-clad, and the presentation, well, left a little to be desired as far as I was concerned. Amongst all that, something tremendous came over.
My major recollection then, there was a meeting fixed to go round to Nems after hours to talk to Brian about him possibly managing us.
You know, I moved to Paris in September '61. John and Paul came to visit me just after I had been there 1 month.
I mean, we knew Jürgen from Hamburg, and he was a good friend of ours. He had his hair sort of like this. We said, can you cut our hair like yours? That was the beginning of the Beatle haircut.
But because it was a long piece of hair fringe going across the forehead, the boys kept doing this with their head. And this is where the famous head shake came from. There was a fan club night down at the Cavern. So the Beatles went on stage in their full leathers, did their first set, went off into the band room, and we waited. And the next thing is the Beatles come back on stage in suits.
And Brian suggested that we just sort of wore ordinary suits.
But no, we never saw the leathers again.
So here we are right in front of the famous Star Club, or what used to be the Star Club, because the building is not there anymore. It's probably still the most famous German club all over the world. And it's, of course, famous for the Beatles.
Manfred Weisleder had a club called Star Club. Horst Fascher, who used to be the manager of the Top Ten, and lost his job and wanted a new one. So he talked Weisleder into having a rock and roll club.
And then I told him about the Beatles. I said the Beatles were in Hamburg in the top 10, and they went down so well. If I would go over now and try to get the Beatles for the Star Club, we would have the biggest opening we could ever think of. So we had to go to Brian Epstein to deal with him.
Well, what happened was Stu fell in love with Astrid, who was the German girl that he'd met out there. And she was very beautiful, little German girl, and he sort of took on a bit of this German student look. It became very fashionable, actually. Wildly fashionable. It was fantastic. We said, Stu! God, I mean, he really looked great. It was quite a major change in his life. But while he was out there, he started getting these headaches.
First time we'd flown over, and we were expecting Stu and Astrid to meet us at the airport. And when we got off the plane, we saw Astrid there. But you always expected Stu to be with her, and she said that Stu had died a couple of days before we actually got into Hamburg.
But he eventually died of a brain hemorrhage.
Pete just bursted out in tears. Paul was just holding me, and John just freaked out. He completely freaked out. He freaked out as far as just laughing until tears came.